Let's start by opening up this side frame 3 flipped SC-Dock. In this section, we're going to take a look at how to modify the way some of these repair tools work. And we're going to also take a look at geometry errors that we can find in a model. Now I've opened up this model and I expect it to be a solid, but as you can see here, it's transparent. Also in the structure tree, it says we have a surface and it has that purple surface icon. So 2 or 3 indications really of that our solid is not a real solid. So when that happens, we go to the repair tab. Now, most of the time when you have one solid, you don't need to run the stitch tool, but sometimes there can be edges that need to be stitched. This happened to find one of them, so we could always do a zoom to fit, take a look at what that gap is, and see if this tool can fix it properly. The stitch tool and the gaps tool often can fix some of the same things. And here we can see that it seems to have done a pretty good job of fixing that. Now looking here, kind of at the corner, this may be an area of corruption that we may or may not need to fix. But for now, that gap has been fixed. Next, we're going to switch over to the gaps tool, and there are 2 left. So I'm going to do a zoom to fit. And let me just kind of spin it around here. We always want to make sure we're looking at it from the outside. And if we take a look at the gap that it finds, it kind of looks, kind of strange here. It looks like we have one edge going straight across and another edge kind of zigzagging about. And we probably just want to have this straight edge going across. So if I click this one to fix, notice that it does not really fix it correctly the way I want. So I'm going to undo. I could either hit Control Z or there's an undo button up here. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape out of that gaps tool. And notice that this face here, this lower face, is the one with that weird curved edge. And this face above it is the one that goes straight across. So if I select this face and hit delete on my keyboard, notice now we have a nice clean single open window. From here, I can go to the missing faces tool and patch that in. So a lot of times when the gaps tool doesn't adjust the edges the way you want, sometimes deleting a face and using missing faces to patch it in can get the job done. But I'm going to go back. Remember, we did have one other gap, so I'm going to go back here. It says one gap, and I'm going to click zoom to fit. And again, it's a good idea if you kind of do the zoom to fit to zoom out and spin the model around. The gap it found was on the other side of the model, and if you try spinning while that gap is on the other side of the model, what's happening is it's spinning around the face in front of you. So what usually happens is the thing you're trying to look at spins way out of the screen. If that ever happens, what you want to do is zoom out so you can really clearly see what it is. Spin it around until you're only looking at that side, and then spin back in. Now, we can see here, and again, I'll kind of spin it around a little bit, that it looks like there's a missing face, not really a gap. It is a small opening based on these criteria that this gaps tool searches by. However, the way gaps tool fixes things is by adjusting edges. And watch what happens. If I click here, it adjusts the edges in such a way that we get some unfavorable geometry. So again, I'm going to undo. I undid twice, so I'm just going to redo to get back to this one here. So remember, we're taking a look at this gap. The gap that it found, remember, it searches based upon a maximum angle and a maximum distance. So it's finding all the openings in a single surface body that more than this amount. But I'd rather patch in a new face there, and that's what the missing faces tool does. So let's switch over to missing faces. The only issue is it didn't find that missing face. Now we can adjust that and have it find that missing face by trying to change some of these values. Let's say we change the angle to 1 from 10. Now it can find it. And since the default option is patch, I can go ahead and click here and it'll automatically patch that in for me. So we go back to gaps, no more gaps in the model. Let's go back to missing faces and find the other ones that it found. Let's go ahead and zoom out, spin around. Here looks like a nice, clean, plain old missing face. Nothing too special or we need to change about that. So I'm just going to click it and allow it to patch that in. One more missing face, and it's just the one on the side of the model. This is, I think, a result of us cutting the model. So just, again, another plain old simple face that we need to patch in. So now we have a solid model. Kind of fast forwarding, let's say someone is trying to perform an operation on this model and it fails, or maybe the model is sent over to ANSYS for meshing, and then there's an error there. What we would do is the next thing we would take a look at are geometry errors, and there's two places you can search for these. There's a check geometry tool in the measure tab that will check geometry. Notice that with nothing selected, it's grayed out. If I click something, just a face, it's not enough. But if I pick an entire body like the solid, then that tool turns on or on highlights and then I can click and it'll run a check geometry through the model. So here it happened to find 11. I do want to point out you can also right click on a body and there's check geometry here. If you right click on the actual object like a solid, it only checks that solid. If you had an assembly and you right clicked on the top level, it would do a check geometry of everything under there. So if it was a subassembly, it would check geometry on everything in the subassembly. Now I'm going to make this window a little bigger just so you can kind of read some of these errors here. So notice that we have 11 errors. The first one says there's an error with the trimming boundary of the face. That means an edge. Remove or recreate the face. The rest of them say there's an actual error with the face. Remove or recreate the face. I'm going to move this down a little bit. When I click on the first one, it may be hard to see what it's highlighting, so there's this nice zoom to fit button. Now with the first error, it seems to be related to almost the entire model, so that's why it didn't zoom in on anything. When I click this second one, notice the faces that are highlighted and it zoomed in on it. And it does appear like this is on the other side of the model. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to spin that around there and reselect this. And it appears to be highlighting a sphere and this planar face here. When I click the next one, it more or less is highlighting the same geometry. I'll move this over a little bit more, maybe bring this back. Click on the next one. It's every one I'm selecting here is the sphere and an additional face. The sphere and another face, a sphere and a different face. So you could kind of see a theme here, aside from this one, which we'll deal with separately. But notice a theme here that all of them involve this sphere. So let's close out of this check geometry window and zoom in and kind of try to see what's going on. So we have this sphere, which doesn't really look like it belongs there. And if I kind of rotate here, you can kind of see that this sphere fills in this window. However, again, there's a window here. So notice that there's a face missing. So without trying to figure out why or how this happened, what we have here is that we wanted a sphere to fill in this corner round. This was supposed to be just a piece of a sphere, but for some reason, the inverse of it, the face around what we wanted, got imported. Regardless of what happened, I can select that sphere, right-click, and delete. Now that sphere is gone, but also there's still no face here, but this is an easy fix. We just go to our Repair tab, turn on Missing Faces. It finds that missing face. We can click it, and now that face has been patched in. And again, we have our solid. So let me zoom out a little bit. Let me right-click here and do a check geometry. If no window pops up, you may get a little info bubble that says no problems have been found. But notice that just by removing that sphere, we fixed 9 of the 11 issues. If we do a zoom to fit, this first one is on the whole model. Sometimes you get ones that it really can't figure out where the area is, but oftentimes it's related to another area, which was this one right here. So let's go ahead and zoom out, spin around. Let's select that again. And it's this area right here. And let's go ahead and close out of check geometry and try to see what's going on. If I kind of spin around, there's some weird shadowing here. I can kind of see into the part, this edge right here. Not sure if these are supposed to be two faces, but one thing I want to point out, I'm clicking in white space to clear my selection. Now notice that these clean faces, I can easily click and select them. This face right here, I can click and select, but this face, that one that it was highlighting as corrupt, notice I can't even highlight it. It highlights either this face next to it, or right now it's highlighting the face behind it. Same thing with this face here. Notice that I cannot click this face to select it. It's selecting the face behind it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a selection technique that allows us to select corrupt faces. You'll remember with box select, if I drag left to right, it selects things only in the box. And I could always try that out here and then deselect these extra faces around it. And if I were to zoom in a little bit more like this and do a box select here, I can deselect those faces that do look like they're good. And now notice that those two bad faces are selected, and I can right click and delete. I do want to show another similar trick. Remember, left to right are things completely inside of the box. Right to left are things that only cross over and touch the box. So if I zoom in on this corrupt face and I do a small little right to left box select, notice that it picks that face. In some situations, it may also pick the face behind it like it did here. All you have to do is hold Control and click that face to deselect, and now that corrupt face is selected. So I like the, either of these box select methods work. Here we can do left to right. And for now, I just want to grab, and maybe I do want to delete this face too. That face does not look that good either. So let's just take care of all of those faces and delete them all. From here, depending on how much, how we want this missing face to be replaced, we could use the missing faces tool, click the check mark, and now we have a nice clean single face there. If I undo, perhaps we wanted one face here and one face here. All I need to do is build the edge here, and I can do that with our blend tool, similar to one of the previous advanced repair sections. I basically select this point and Control select this point, and now we get a straight line. And if I care about it being tangent to this edge, I'm going to hold Alt and select this edge, and then Alt and Control to select this edge. Hit the Enter key, and now we have that curve here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select that curve and these surrounding edges, and I do want to turn off the blend tool. We're not going to be doing a blend. In fact, what I want to do is first turn on the fill tool and check patch blend on the left. Now I can Control select the edges that make up this opening and hit the check mark, and now we have a face there. Because we only have a single face left to replace, the easiest thing to do is turn on missing faces, click the check mark, and now we've got that in there. And if I hide that curves folder, now we have some nice clean geometry. So let's just do a geometry check one more time. And in this case, there were no errors, and a little info bubble popped up saying no geometry problems were found. So for all intents and purposes, this model is ready to go and move on. Now, I happen to know that one of the areas that I patched in before was right over here. This was that gap that we fixed where I said the corner looked kind of bad. And, the geometry may not be corrupt at the kernel level where those errors come in, but we may want to clean it up. So, we could always try using one of the tricks from the other section, like the sphere trick. We just put a sphere largely around this intersection to remove any corruption, and then we escape out of the sphere tool, select that sphere, and use the fill tool. Now, in doing that, you can see we get some of the same bad geometry, and it really looks like this is the bad face. So I'm going to delete that face, and it also looks like that neighboring face is bad too, so let's delete that one. So I think this should clean up, and here we'll just delete one more face. So that one looked bad too. So we're going to use the same blending method where we turn on the blend tool. I'm going to pick this point here and this point here, and I want it to be tangent to this edge, so I'm going to Alt select this edge and Alt Control select this edge. Click the check mark, and it puts in that edge, and we'll do one more from here to here. And we want it to be tangent to this edge and tangent to this edge. So it's Alt select and then Alt and Control, and we click the check mark. Now we have nice clean edges, and it's just a matter of turning on fill and patch blend, selecting the edges that we want to patch within. Now, if we want to drive tangency to any of these faces, it's that same Alt or Alt and Control to select multiple ones. And what it's going to do is it's going to try to make it tangent to these faces. So we click the check mark there and we get a face there. Now we want to do one, and I can go ahead and hide our curves. Actually, we just want to hide this curve. The reason I'm hiding the curve is we want to patch blend to the edge and not the curve. So we'll turn on fill, patch blend is on. So we've got this edge, and this curve. And then we want to alt select this face, alt and control, and hit the check mark to patch that in. And then we'll hide the curves folder one more time, turn on fill, patch blend. And here I could just do a double click because I know I have one closed opening there. And again, alt and control the faces around it in an attempt to drive tangency, and we'll click the check mark. So just a little practice here, and if we zoom in, a much cleaner corner. I don't see any issues now. So, much cleaner than it was before. So, some errors you may run into visually through a model. Some may appear via check geometry. But this is how we can take a look at those errors and fix any of those corruption by using some similar techniques from before, like deleting, patching, or blending. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.